Okay, so let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself like right at a crossroads, knowing exactly what you wanted? What was actually good for you, what could bring real happiness, and then almost, well, inexplicably, you actively worked against it. Maybe you blew off a great opportunity or found ways to mess up a perfectly good relationship, or you just kept tripping yourself up, even though you knew better. If any of that sounds familiar, then yeah, you're definitely in the right place today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really getting into it, the psychology of self-sabotage, why we destroy what we want most. And this whole deep dive is built on some really fascinating insights, decades of psychological study, offering a pretty comprehensive look at the hidden, often just baffling reasons behind this stuff.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to go beyond just recognizing self-sabotage, like seeing the pattern. We want to understand why. Why does it actually happen? We're going to explore those subconscious roots, the tricky inner dialogues we all have, and those really subtle habits, the ones you might not even notice, that keep us stuck. The goal here is to give you a bit of a shortcut, maybe, to understanding this deeply human thing, and perhaps, yeah, even a starting point for maybe shifting those old patterns.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this.
Yeah.
When we think about self-sabotage, it often sounds like, deliberate self-destruction. But what's so compelling from the research is this idea that it's rarely random. It's actually often a form of protection, cleverly disguised. It's like your internal system is trying to keep you safe, quote unquote, but in a really, really unhelpful way. We're talking about these deep subconscious fears, things like the fear of failure, sure, but also that really pervasive fear of abandonment, or even, and this one's surprising, the fear of success. And these fears are just profoundly shaping our behavior without us even realizing it most of the time.
Exactly. And what often gets overlooked is where these patterns start. They usually originate much, much earlier than we think. Our sources consistently point back to childhood experiences, especially situations where love or approval or just acceptance felt conditional, like you had to earn it. And when you grow up feeling like you have to earn belonging, it can create this really deeply ingrained belief, kind of a core wound, that you just don't deserve good things. And this belief then, it just quietly but powerfully influences pretty much every choice you make later on.
Which leads to this incredible paradox, doesn't it? Because consciously, we might desperately want change. We want growth, improvement. We set goals, we visualize success, we do all the things. But our nervous system, like way down deep, it's actually wired for what's familiar. Think of it like a path worn into your brain. It's just easier to follow that path, even if it leads somewhere uncomfortable or painful, just because it's known. Your brain basically prioritizes the known over the unknown almost every single time.
Right. So, if we tie this all together, self-sabotage isn't really a sign of weakness, not at all. It's actually a pretty sophisticated, okay, maybe misguided, but sophisticated attempt at keeping you safe. It's your system trying to shield you from what it perceives as threats, even when those threats are actually genuine success or, deep happiness. So this brings up a powerful question for you listening. Can you think back to a time when you knew exactly what you wanted, but you still found yourself pushing it away somehow? And when you look at that, was it really truly a fear of failing? Or could it have been something deeper, like a fear of what success might actually demand of you? Maybe more visibility, maybe more responsibility, or even losing those familiar struggles that weirdly feel like part of your identity. And, how might those really early emotional wounds still be unconsciously running the show in your life today?
Yeah, running the show. And carrying on from that, the sources we looked at really emphasize these powerful internal voices, like they're the main architects of this self-destruction.
Oh, they absolutely are. The inner critic is, it's the classic example, right?
Yeah.
It's this internalized voice. Often it sounds suspiciously like critical parents or teachers or even just broader societal messages we've picked up. It's that constant little whisper of doubt, the one that says, you can't do that, or you're not good enough, or uh-oh, you'll just mess it up again. It's just incredibly undermining.
And then there's this other concept, the inner child, which isn't literal, obviously, but it's like an emotional memory bank. It's that part of us holding on to old needs, old fears from way back, still reacting to past pain, past traumas. It's like a younger version of you is still in there, trying to find safety, but using really outdated, unhelpful strategies.
And it's fascinating, really, how these internal voices, you've got the loud critic, and then the sort of wounded inner child, how they often work together, almost conspire to sabotage any progress. They use these really powerful, undermining messages. Things like, you're not enough, or you'll be rejected if you stand out, or maybe just stay hidden, it's safer. These aren't just negative thoughts. They feel like they're designed to keep you small. And in this really twisted way, safe, right? By stopping you from stepping into vulnerability or what feels feels like risk.
It really is almost like a subconscious addiction, an addiction to being less than. Because in a strange way, it feels safer, more predictable than success or happiness might feel. It's that familiar discomfort again. So maybe something to think about. Whose voice does your inner critic actually sound like? Does it sound like someone specific? And can you remember the earliest time, maybe the earliest age, you felt like you had to hide your real self just to feel safe or accepted? And when we talk about these voices, is it actually possible to completely outgrow them? Or is the work more about learning how to reparent them? Offering them the compassion, the validation, the understanding they maybe didn't get when those patterns first got wired in?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it leads us right into another core idea from the research. This surprising comfort we can find in familiar pain. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's not uncommon at all for people to subconsciously choose predictable misery over the sheer uncertainty that comes with peace or, positive change.
It's a really tough concept to wrap your head around, isn't it? But like we were saying, the brain just has this strong preference for the known. Even if that known environment or that known emotional state is toxic, even if it's deeply uncomfortable, it feels predictable. And somehow that feels safer than the completely unpredictable nature of the unknown, even if that unknown actually promises something much better.
Right, and we often see this play out in what people sometimes call trauma bonding, which isn't just about romantic relationships, by the way. You can form these strong, unhealthy attachments to familiar patterns of distress or chaos itself. Difficult emotional states like always being stressed or always feeling overwhelmed or being the fixer in every single situation, these can become such a deeply ingrained part of our identity, almost comfortable in a strange way. We start using these labels for ourselves. Oh, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm the one who always struggles. And that makes it even harder to imagine life without that familiar struggle.
And what's really wild is how this subconscious preference then leads us to, unwittingly recreate old emotional environments in new relationships, new jobs, new life situations. It's like we unconsciously sniff out dynamics that echo our past, even the painful parts. So maybe ask yourself, why do you think we often find ourselves repeating relationships or situations that feel strangely similar to past traumas? Is that really comfort? Or is it maybe a profound, deep-down fear of stepping into a version of yourself you don't even recognize yet? And what part of you, way down deep, might actually feel a need to be in some kind of pain just to feel, real?
Yeah.
Or significant?
Okay, so moving on. When we talk self-sabotage, most people picture big dramatic implosions, right? Like completely bombing a huge presentation or ruining a major life event. But the research we looked at makes it super clear that most self-sabotage isn't like that at all. It's way more subtle. It's the everyday actions, often disguised as logic or necessity or just being practical.
Yeah, this is where it gets really, really insightful, I think. Think about classic procrastination, the age-old, I'll start tomorrow. The sources frame this not just as laziness, which is how we usually think of it, but as a very common form of self-protection. It's basically your brain trying to avoid the perceived risk, or the discomfort, or maybe the potential judgment that comes with actually taking action. It's a subtle little no to growth.
And then you've got all these other avoidance behaviors that often just fly under the radar. Things like missing opportunities that come your way, canceling plans last minute, maybe even ghosting people when they offer genuine help. These are all subtle, but really powerful defense mechanisms. Often they just keep us stuck right where we are in that familiar, less risky, quote-unquote, comfort zone.
Okay, and what about perfectionism? Because that's often seen as a good thing, right? A drive for excellence. But the research suggests perfectionism is frequently rooted in a deep-seated fear, usually fear of judgment or criticism. And it can totally paralyze us. It stops us from ever putting anything out into the world because nothing ever feels quite good enough. So it's another subtle way we just say no. No to growth, no to being fully seen. So maybe think about your own perfectionism. When does it genuinely feel like it's about doing your absolute best work? And when is it maybe fundamentally about avoiding being vulnerable and judged?
And another really crucial, often invisible form of this micro-sabotage is hyper-independence, which is often actually a trauma response. It's marked by that really strongly held belief, I don't need anyone, I can do everything myself. But ironically, this belief, while it seems strong and self-reliant on the surface, it often just isolates us. It prevents us from getting the very support connection we actually need to truly thrive and grow. So I encourage you to consider, what are your personal micro-sabotage habits? The ones you might not even recognize day to day? And why does the very act of growing, of changing, sometimes feel almost physically threatening to us.
Okay, so if all this subconscious self-sabotage is going on under the surface, how on earth do we start to break free? The sources are pretty clear that self-awareness, just noticing it, that's the crucial first step. It's like the initial act of rebellion against these old ways. But real freedom, the kind that actually lasts, seems to come from actively repatterning our nervous system and our core beliefs.
That's exactly right. And it really begins with identifying those emotional triggers, what sets you off, by understanding what trips that wire, and then taking the time to trace those triggers back to where they actually started. That's where the deeper awareness really kicks in. It's about understanding the why behind that knee-jerk reaction instead of just, reacting automatically again.
And then crucially, there's this piece about nervous system regulation, actively changing what safe actually feels like in your body, in your mind. It's not just about thinking different thoughts, it's about feeling different. Feeling safer with the new rather than the old, uncomfortable familiar. Imagine literally training your nervous system to prefer calm and growth over that familiar baseline of stress or anxiety. Things like deep breathing, grounding exercises, even just gentle movement can actually help shift your body out of that constant fight or flight mode and create a new internal sense of safety.
Yeah, and instead of that harsh self-judgment, when you inevitably catch yourself falling back into an old sabotaging pattern, because the sources really emphasize replacing that judgment with genuine curiosity, asking yourself questions like, okay, what is this behavior actually trying to protect me from right now? Or what underlying need is this pattern attempting to meet, even if it's doing it imperfectly? Yeah. Just that shift in perspective from self-condemnation to gentle curiosity, it's incredibly powerful.
And the good news is, the research points to concrete tools and techniques that can really help with this repatterning work. Things like visualization, which can literally help create new neural pathways in your brain. Right? Inner child work, which lets us go back and kind of reparent those wounded younger parts of ourselves. And critically, reframing failure, not seeing it as some catastrophic ending, but as essential feedback. Just data, really. A signal that you need to adjust your course. So maybe for you listening, what would healing from self-sabotage actually look like in your day-to-day life? What would be different? And how can we cultivate a real felt sense of safety with success, especially when maybe we're just not used to it? And do you think it's truly possible to catch and interrupt a self-sabotaging pattern before the thought or the impulse even fully forms? Get ahead of it.
So yeah, to kind of wrap this all up, the main takeaway is to remember that self-sabotage, really, at its core, it's a protective mechanism. That's what it is. It's an old strategy, something your system developed, probably very cleverly at the time, to try and keep you safe in the past. But now, it's often playing out in a completely new context where, frankly, it's no longer serving your highest good. It's outdated software.
Exactly. And by understanding these hidden drivers, by bringing awareness, shining a light on those underlying fears and patterns, you actually gain the power to choose a different path. You can literally start to rewrite your own internal script, moving from just reacting out of protection to intentionally choosing growth.
So we want to leave you with this final, maybe provocative thought to chew on. If self-sabotage is fundamentally about protection, what would it truly mean for you to feel safe enough, genuinely safe enough, to finally start protecting yourself from your own deepest desires and your immense potential? What new identity, what completely new version of yourself might actually emerge if you could truly embrace growth without needing that familiar old pain? It's a journey, for sure, and it really starts with curiosity and a good dose of compassion for yourself along the way.